Hey, family, go ahead on and tag and share. Let's get everybody in. Let's get everybody in. Today's going to be an exciting broadcast right here. So you want to get everybody in. It's the Greg James Community Show, and it's going down. Let's get everybody in. Let's tag, share. Let's get everybody in to the broadcast. It's happening right here. 95.3. It's hallelujah. Hey, we're trying to give you time to go ahead on and get everybody in. We got some exciting news. Mother Patricia, how are you? Carolyn, how are you? That's right. It's right here on 95.3. Want to say good afternoon and once again welcome to the Greg James Community Show. That's right. It's happening right here on hallelujah 95.3 FM. That's right. If you've been following me on Facebook, then you should know that it's a one-on-one, and it's going to be held with none other than the conscious check queen, Miss Christy Henry. We're going to be talking today with Greg James, who just filed to run for House seat.
Greg James, you're on a whole nother level when you speak to yourself in the third person.
I know, right? So we're going to talk to him today, who just filed to run for House seat District 3, and we're excited to have on the phone with us Pastor Nikki Collins, and hosting this one-on-one is none other than Christy Henry. How are you?
I'm good. Listen, Pastor James, we want to get everybody to get the notebook out, right? Because we got to get your notebook out today, all right? Because we want everyone that's listening in today to understand that it is high time for non-foolishness in public leadership. And we want you to get your notebooks out. We want you to listen. We're going to be throwing a whole lot of terms out there. And then we're going to give Reverend James, who's been in the space of community representation for a long time, but sometimes you don't understand what that means and how that representation is translating into actual things, actual topics, actual concepts that have to be addressed on the state government level and in partnership with the different municipalities. And I am really excited that Nikki's going to be with us today because she's going to be able to give us a perspective, not just from Leon County, but from Gaston County as well. So y'all go ahead and get your notebooks out and go ahead and make sure you call in. I need all my educators. I need all of my business people. I need all of my re-entry and mental health people. I need all of y'all to be tuned, call in. We're going to be reading your comments, answering your questions, and making sure everybody understands that this is about healthy economy and healthy community. And that is where leadership has to take place. We are over the era of what we call manipulation, and we are looking for representation here on out in public leadership. And so we're excited about this conversation and look forward to having it. Is Dr. Nikki on with us yet?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
I hear you.
I think we hear you. Well, let me make sure that those in Facebook can hear you, Dr. Nikki. Certainly we're delighted to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you all?
We're doing absolutely amazing. And we want to say to all of our Facebook friends, go ahead on the tag and share. We want to get you in. And for those of you who are listening in, hey, this is a one-on-one with the new kid that has just filed to be a part of a plethora of folk who are vying for State Representative District 8. And joining me, and it's your show. It's Christy Henry.
And let me preface this because there are a lot of wonderful people running for that seat that will that Representative Raymond Alexander, my neighbor, good friend, will not be seeking re-election for. And so it's a good thing that there are a lot of people that want to go through this process and that want to have this office. But we don't just want anybody. right?
Absolutely.
I thought about it a minute ago before I got here a minute ago. Yeah, that's how I feel. How DCA, the Department of Community Affairs, was the state's arm extension into communities back in the day. And with the deactivation or reduction of that agency's function and couched into the Department of Economic Opportunity, there has not been a robust, if you will. Basically, the state seems to not be the front porch of Florida any longer. It's the front porch for lobbyists, for people who have connections, people who have, the ability to pay for people to represent them and to translate issues into resources on the state level. And that's why I'm really excited about your candidacy.
Amen.
Because when we talk about resources on the state level, we're limited in local government to fund everything. We're limited in organizational budget to fund everything. We're even limited to an extent on state budget to fund everything. But the state has resources that they acquire and they accumulate, and they go into organizations and entities that are supposed to provoke impact, particularly in disinvested and in communities that experience chronic and systemic hardship. So to have someone in a seat that has the heart and the feel and understands all of the nuances of what happens here in the communities that we serve, that is something that's remarkable. And we're looking forward to having you talk about your why today, right? Because today is about your why. Today is, why would you take your life, right? Why would you take your life, which has been a very colorful life?
Absolutely.
Why would you take it and put it on Front Street in the political process in this time and in this season?
Well, before we dive into the why, I think that is a very good question. And that's why we're here. But because we are talking just from a spiritual standpoint, the fact that Jesus came and his only purpose, his why, was to bridge the gap that was between God and man.
Right.
So there is a gap in our community.
Sure.
And just when you convert that over from spiritual to earthly, what gap is it? And we're going to talk about the gap. There has to be someone who takes on that same role, knowing that you've been called for it, knowing that the time has come. Jesus only came into the world when the fullness of time had come. Greg James only stepped up because the fullness of time has come. Come for what? Come for the persons, the communities that are suffering, the communities that are feeling hardship, the organizations that are making impact in our community without having the income that is needed. The time has come for their hand to get in touch with my hand so that I can take their hand in my hand and connect it with the hands that have what they need to do what needs to be done to make our community safer and better. So it's all about timing, and we're going to get into that, why I would take this life that has gone through so much, battered, bruised, broken, put on public display. And Pastor Nikki, we're going to talk about something that is so valuable, and that is when we serve in our communities, and how we serve and why we serve. And so, Christine, I just like to say, with no fear, no regrets, to knowing that what my past has been has propelled me into a moment that I'm grateful for. Do I often think about the hurt that I caused? Of course. Do I often think about the people I disappointed? Of course. Do I think about the pain that my family experienced, my church experienced? Of course. Do I constantly reflect on the lives that I damaged? Of course. But you're not going to hold me captive to something that I paid a price to man for, and God has forgiven me for. So if that's what you're going to use to bring up, well, guess what? You'll cause me to write another book about how people gossip and how people display what has happened decades ago. Because you'll never use that. I have used that to leverage every step of my life. That's why I wrote the book, Leverage. So talking about Greg James was a drug dealer, I talk about that. Talking about Greg James went to prison, I talk about that. Talking about Greg James sold drugs out of the church, I talk about that. Talking about Greg James did this, Greg James talk about that. So if that's what you feel you have to talk about, then guess what? You are wasting time, energy, and space. And you're using up your breath to talk about something that I've already talked about. And it does not devalue me. What it does, it gives me more value because I've understood that that position that I was in, it was prison. It was painful, but it's through the prison wound that I got a lot of purpose for my life. So you can't use that as a whip or a tool to tell me you don't need to run for office. You can't use that to tell me you're not qualified. You cannot use that to tell Greg James that you don't understand people, the issues, because it was through that place that I really understood issues, because we had to fight inside of a place that had us in bondage. So my incarceration gives birth to my education, but the incarceration gives me the power to understand the experience and the encounters that people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So
and let's go.
Oh, I got you back.
I know. Pull your own back, because you know he think he hosting the show today. He ain't hosting. I'm asking the questions. All right. And you know,
let's stop. Nikki, could you say that?
Nikki, hey, how you doing, Nikki? Good evening. I think it's important as you talk about this that this campaign ain't about Greg James, but it is, right? So, Nikki, kind of talk a little bit about from a community perspective and from a person that's looking on. You know, why is this an exciting candidacy?
Well, thank y'all so much, first of all. But I'm super excited about Greg James actually putting his hat in the race, you know, stepping out on stage to stand, to speak, to represent the people. I'm talking about the common people, not the people that everyone knows, not the people, you know, who got it all together, but I'm talking about the people like you and I who are here, who are on the ground, who are experiencing, you know, some of the things that are going on in our community. I am so happy that we have someone like Greg James who decided to step up. He's a pastor, yes, we understand it, thank God, but we need someone who knows God, someone who knows the people, the community, someone who has already done the work, someone who is doing the work. I know firsthand how Pastor James have totally created programs for youth, you know, prevention programs that will help you, you know, go take another path, not the path that he took, you know, but that's because of his experience. He can stand in front of those kids and say, look, I've already been there. And I see him do it every day. I'm so excited because Pastor James represents the people who we're supposed to be fighting for. He represents that. And so I know firsthand, I've seen Pastor James firsthand help people that everybody else has turned their back on. So it's time now that we sit back behind our computers, we sit back, you know, behind our keyboards, and we talk about change, and we talk about somebody needs to do something. So when someone steps out and say, you know what, I'll go, we need to rally behind that person. We need to rally behind the person who has not been groomed by man, but who have been groomed by God, and also have been a person who man have seen and have looked up to, have saw him make his mistakes, and now saying, look, I did my time. I have now righted my wrongs, and now I am being used to catapult the common man into the place in which God has called him to And so Pastor James really this is the time. Now is the time. Now is the time for change. Now it's time out for us to be quiet. That's why I decided to say something. That's why I decided to stand up, because it's like, what are we going to do? We're going to continue to complain and say we'll pray about it, or we're going to pray and then execute. Are we going to pray and move? We got to watch as well as pray. And so I'm very excited about this.
That's right.
Well,
yeah.
Well, let me just say this to you, Pastor Nikki, and certainly I want to applaud you, because I mean, when you heard about it, you and your husband reached out immediately and said, "Hey, whatever we can do, we're all in," and that made me feel really well. But I know, Christy, when you step into the realm of politics, there's a slogan that circulates in that arena. It said, when you get into the world of politics, you really find out who your true friends are. Ooh. And there are people all the time who will celebrate you in private. But when you step on a platform where your public announcement has to be made, then you really see who people are. So I say this, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I have no ill thoughts about whoever people decide that they give their loyalty to. I had several conversations this morning, and I mentioned that when I look at a candidate, I look at what I look at, and I support who I support. And so I'm excited about this conversation one-on-one with Greg James, because he is definitely an interesting person. And and someone said the other day, said he do so much advocating. He's advocating, and if he goes to run for office, he's going to lose because he's an advocate. And I said to myself, they don't understand what the definition is. I mean, if he's advocating and he's an activist, then that means he's taking on issues. Is that right?
Well, I think it's important as we, because this is a hallelujah. All right. We want to make sure that we get the hallelujah in. And the scripture says that promotion don't come from the east, nor the west, or the north, or the south, but God is the judge. He pulleth down one and he setteth up another. So we don't want to negate the providence of God and the sovereignty of God in all of these things, because again, it is not, Pastor Nikki, something that you take on lightly. To go running for public office, you put your whole business on display. But what is exciting about this particular conversation is that your past has been your path for your purpose. And so you can't be ashamed of it, because it's a part of who you are. It's made you into the advocate. It's made you viable, and it's made you legitimate in the spaces. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about the different spaces that you found yourself, from the White House all the way, up or down, cross sector, working with others, working across the faith community, working with reentry issues. Let's talk about that work, because I think as we go into the issue, it is about Greg James, but it ain't about Greg James, right?
Absolutely.
It's about what is it that you bring to the table that parallels and juxtaposes the real issues and the real social determinants of health, of which reentry and proper opportunity affords, particularly to the population that is the majority within District 8. So let's talk about that, because that's the real conversation.
That I'm grateful for is that the experience of having to been incarcerated really gave birth to a real passion to say to the God that I believe made it possible, that if I ever got free, then I'm going to fight to make sure that I stop this prison to pipeline. I'm going to fight. And what really, I'll never forget, I was in Leavenworth, Kansas, and I was there with a man who was a grandfather. I was there with the son. I was there with the grandson, and all of them were in one space. All of them were in one space. Can we pause? I think we're having trouble on our Facebook page.
Oh, that's all right.
That's all right.
This is warfare.
Oh, it is warfare. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And so, thank you. And that particular, when I would see them sit together, when I would see them having conversation together, it made me realize that, God, if I'm free from this, I've got to break this. it appeared that they were okay being all in the same space, 3 generations. And eventually that did happen. I regained my freedom. So what that did for me, that put criminal justice reform at the forefront. As you know, everything that I worked for, everything that I advocated for centered around reform. It's centered around reentry. It's centered around prevention and intervention. So therefore, that was my one agenda. It wasn't mental health. It wasn't anything else but that. And because that was the one thing that I dealt with, if you're an elected official and you're coming back to the Capitol year after year, and you got a meeting with Greg James, it's only to talk about prison reform. And if I talk with Christy Henry for 4 years, eventually we're going to establish some kind of relationship, because Christy Henry knows that I'm just talking about prison reform. But the bottom line to it is I became so engaged and so enamored with the relationships of giving understanding. The Bible said people perish for a lack of understanding. So if you haven't sat in my seat, you wouldn't understand what I'm telling you about. So I got to educate you on how it feels to sit on a concrete bench as opposed to sitting in a lazy boy chair. I don't know how a lazy boy feel. I know how the concrete bench feel. So I'm going to tell you how that feels until you really begin to feel me. And that's what has happened over the years with me. Christian criminal justice reform has been that one thing that has really driven me to create relationships. It has driven me to be in positions that only God could put me in.
And to the audience who may be listening to you, because again, I told y'all to take your notebooks out today. What is criminal justice reform? What were some of the things that you advocate for? Let's break it down in make it plain for your audience. What is criminal justice reform?
Well, I think one of the most important things when we talk about the Department of Corrections, that name within itself says something. But what are you correcting? So if we're going to talk about reform, and I have to say this because when I got out at the time, the Department of Corrections was being ran under the leadership of Walt McNeil when I got out. And when I got out, he was able to see what I was doing. And he was just launching reentry initiative. So criminal justice reform is about how do we make sure that the men and the women that are leaving out have the transformation, how they have in place what they need to re-enter into our communities and be productive. So with that being said, the work that I was doing became, in his eyes, a model. Can you imagine a guy on federal prison? He's now getting invited to come back into the prison system and to lead a re-entry initiative. And I'm on federal prison. It's obvious that at that time, Walt McNeil, the secretary, saw that, hey, this is a model that guys need to see what real transformation looks like when it comes to that. So we're talking about the ability to help men and women understand, one, how you must know transformation, how laws, how policies, how things have to be changed to make sure that we have a level playing field. The biggest reform that has taken place in 2018 was the fact that men from across the state of Florida got out, went petition driving to get the right to vote back for ex-felons. That's reform. Why? Because now it gives Greg James a sense of getting his identity back. Why? Because your vote and your voice go together.
That's right.
So we're talking about, God, this is so passionate to me. We're talking about the fact that business owners need to know that, look, Joe coming out, he's ready now to be a part of your business environment. He's ready to be a part of the community because there has been work put in place to help shape him, to help mold him. By who? By men who look like him, who can give him an example. I was talking to a business owner this morning, and I was telling him about a young man who came out of prison absolutely with nothing. Now he has a multi-million-dollar company in Tallahassee, in Midway, Florida, out of prison with nothing.
Have mercy.
So that's real reform, being able to help ensure that we're giving men and women the tools that they need, and being able to help get laws in place to help make their transition easier and make the playing field easier.
That's right. That's right. And just so our audience can understand, the definition of reform is making changes in something, typically a social, political, or economic institution or practice, in order to improve it. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of the prison system on communities that are similar to the demographic makeup of District 8, because we know our community has been disproportionately impacted by the prison, the school to prison pipeline, by the systemic racism that creates the type of scarcity that puts us in survival mode chronically and consistently. Let's talk about that and why that is an issue, because there's a lot of what you call intersectionality of issues when you talk about prison reform.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about a lot of fathers, a lot of uncles, a lot of granddads that have been removed from their families. That protection has been removed from their families and their children. It is a dichotomy of social chaos that happens when you remove and break up families, quite frankly, through the use of the correction system. And so I really want to make sure that those intersectionalities are understood, because it's not just a standalone issue. It's an issue of our day.
Well, I mean, until you're able to really see it from the eyes and the perspective of someone who lives it, it's really hard to really understand when you look at the male population, the father's population in our community, when you look at how many homes are operated by single moms, fathers in prison. You're talking about young boys, 12 and 13-year-old, that are now embracing a street lifestyle that tells them, hey, you got to be a man. You got to take this package and provide for your family. So incarceration does so much to really depress our community even the more, especially when there are not opportunities made available for our children. It does so much more than just lock a person up.
Yes,
it locks up a family.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, it puts a whole family in a place where you have allowed now a generation to stumble and suffer. So I just feel that we have to be able to understand that that's been my fight. That's been the issue that I have, ran with forever. So therefore, creating relationships with the Secretary of the Department of Correction is important to me.
Yeah.
Creating relationships with the state attorney is important to me. Creating a relationship with the public defender is important to me, because the population I serve ends up in the courthouse. And when they end up in the courthouse, then they end up in the Department of Corrections. So even in Department of Corrections, I need relationships, because I'll never forget, and I'll say this and we can move back. I'll never forget, there was a family in Gadsden County, and their loved one had been diagnosed, and their loved one was given the report that he would die in prison. And because that they could not treat him anymore, because of the relationships and because of the work that I had been doing in the community, I got the call and they said, he's going to die. We're just trying to figure out how and what we can do. Is there a thing called compassionate release? How can we get that done? Immediately, I did not hesitate to start the ball moving to see how could we get this man out to spend time with his family.
Yes.
Okay. And guess what? We talked with the secretary. We talked with the people he put us in touch with. We went to the state attorney office, state attorney at the time, and now Jack Campbell, who said to us, well, let's look at it. Let's see what we need to do. They put a motion in for him to be released. Here's a guy who's been given a limited amount of time. His family wants to be able to spend those last moments with him. They can't visit him at the hospital. He's surrounded by 24-hour security, and he's dying. But what we were able to do, we was able to get the state attorney to get us a motion. We was able to get the judge to sign it. I was able, along with another Representative Daniels, to call that family and say to them, we have the papers. he's getting ready to get immediate release. He's not going to have to go back to the Department of Corrections. And guess what? He was able to be released and spend time with his family, get better health care.
Yes.
So here it is. We got a system that men are in, women are in, that cannot get adequate health care and would much rather your loved one die inside without having the adequate health care, as opposed to releasing them to the family so that they can get it. I mean, I just dealt with that situation not too long ago with another pastor here. And the thing about it is this: we have to have people who understand that you're causing more money to be spent and you're not giving what is required of these inmates. So prison reform and fighting for families and kids who get in trouble and and that's been my whole life. For 14 years, that's where I was.
And I know personally, we're in our work together on the community level, who you've advocated for. And I just want to make sure that we have some of our friends that are on the line that you have done community advocacy with that has a similar conversation to you. We have Dr. Ed Clark on the line. And bringing in Dr. Clark, I just want to throw this notebook moment out there to our audience, that the poverty rate for single mother families in 2020 was 23.4%, nearly 5 times more than the rate of 4.7% for married couple families. And among children living with a mother, only 38.1% lived in poverty. In contrast, only 7.5% of children in a 2-parent family were counted as poor. Why do I bring that up? Because incarceration and survivalism breaks up families, and nobody else other than Dr. Ed Clark, who is a thought leader in this space, that can talk about the regressiveness of how this system has wreaked havoc on families and communities. Welcome, Dr. Clark.
Hey, thank you guys. Can you hear me well?
Oh, yeah.
Well, good afternoon. And first off, thank you all for having me. I appreciate being able to speak, and particularly in support of one of my dearest and oldest friends, Pastor Greg James. And so right off top, I'd like to commend you for the courage it takes to throw your hat in the ring, knowing that you're going to get those bars coming at you from all angles about what the past was about. But that said, all of us have a past. And if we are wise, we'll use those lessons learned from that past to chart a new course and hopefully be able to use our experiences to prevent other folks from taking a wrong turn. So as Christy alluded to, yes, incarceration has a way of really depriving not only a family, but the community. You pull an individual out of the community, you not only take them out of that family, you take them off the tax roll, or you take her off the tax roll, because women also, unfortunately, sometimes spend time in prison. And so in my line of work, I'm a public health professional. We look at things through that lens, and we have a term or a concept called ACEs, which means adverse childhood experiences. And one of those adverse childhood experiences is losing a parent to incarceration. And that has a exacerbating effect over the lifespan on what the opportunities are for a child and also that community when they experience incarceration of a family. And so, again, when I look at my friend and my brother, Greg James, he's what we would call a credible messenger. And I would like to say this right off top. I'm actually in the doctor's office right now with my wife, and I'm calling in. The doctor just walked in, but he's going to be gracious to give me 2 more minutes to finish this screen. Okay. So Greg is what we would call a credible messenger. And why would we call him a credible messenger? Because he knows exactly what he's talking about. He's not just talking the talk. He's walked that walk. He has lived experiences. And so when we're talking about representing a community, it's wonderful to have people know that the person that is speaking on their behalf can actually identify with what it is that they are experiencing in that moment. And so, again, I commend Greg for that. And Christy, if you have any other questions to direct my comments, I'm open to.
Well, I just know that in your work as a health professional, that we understand the social determinants of health, economic stability, education, access and quality, neighborhood and built environment, healthcare access and quality, social and community context. And when you bring those issues into the intersectionality of the criminal justice reform that we're talking about today, there are some real gaps that people who cannot avoid. It can't just be, oh yeah, we got to address this. No, there are real families in District 8 that are impacted by this issue in particular. And I think that your knowledge space can really inform why this candidacy and why candidacies of any sort have to be serious about addressing the issue of criminal justice reform and social justice reform for reentry neighbors, for neighbors reentering.
So let me add this. There's another consideration that I often put forward in terms of the social determinants of health, and that's social policy. A lot of folks don't consider social policy, but social policy is absolutely a determinant of health because it's social, meaning that people are making these decisions, right? And so when we're talking about people that we want to elect to hold those spaces that are going to make those decisions, that are going to impact our lives, whether it's in the criminal justice space, or health space, or the business community, we have to really wrap our minds around the fact that those decisions are going to have long-lasting implications across the lifespan. And again, so I would add social welfare policy or social policy is one of those social determinants. But yes, incarceration is a big deal, not only in our community, but nationally. And we do know that they're disproportionately impacting certain groups of people. And that said, because these are things that are born from social policy, there's something that we can do about it if we have the right representation in place to be able to speak to those issues and to be able to bring voice to the voices of those folks in District 8 who may not otherwise be able to hear.
Well, I want to say this, Dr. Clark, and certainly I'm appreciative. Once you heard that I was making that step, you immediately shared, hey, listen, I know you, I know the work that you do, count me in. I want to say, that many times we're missing out in agencies and those who are serving are missing out so many times because they're failing to know that the lessons that we learn bring a value of experience to the work that we can and will do.
Yes, sir. Again, it's critical, in my opinion, for us to have people who have lived the life, who have lived experiences to be a voice, again, in those spaces, whether it's professional realm. I'm going to step out of this group. Whether it's in those professional spaces or those boardrooms or whatnot, we need to, I think, have a paradigm shift in our thinking. And when I say we, I mean the general public, the business community, about what we do with people in those sentences. There's a phrase that you and I are familiar with, Greg, and that's the EOS date.
Absolutely.
What that is the end of the sentence. But when does that sentence actually end? And if we're serious as a society about reintegrating people, we have to take a real close look at what we're doing in terms of when we allow the sentence to end. For the most part, young men and women after incarceration really experience a life of doors being slammed in their face. But they've actually been given a life sentence as opposed to having an EOS date at the end of the time when they repaid that debt to the society. And so we really have to wrap our minds around what we can do as a community to embrace those folks and reintegrate them. Because many people tend to recidivate because they're hungry. I mean, there's a, Maslow and Lillian theory says that we have to satisfy those basic needs, those needs of food, clothes, and shelter. Everybody needs that. You can't live otherwise. And we don't provide the needs of folks to really seriously be considered to reintegrate back into the society. We actually set them up to be the problem that we say we want to solve. And so again, I would argue that, our community, our business leaders need to take a real serious look, really a self-assessment, and determine how serious they actually are as it relates to reintegrating people. All of us can look back over our past and find something that we're not very pleased with. But that doesn't mean that we should be held accountable for that forever, particularly if we men, Greg, but having the courage. Because those of us who've had these experiences know that feeling, that lump in your throat every time you apply for something else or try to get another position. That knot in your throat that you can't swallow.
Yeah.
Check that damn box.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think
there. And so what we need to be able to do as a society, in my opinion, is understand that some of those experiences really help qualify a person that you need to be able to have an impact with certain populations. But not only that, there's rarely anybody in our community that hasn't experienced the incarceration of somebody, right? So they can identify with that, whether they were the person that had to receive those collect calls, whether they were the person that had to send in that little change so the person would have some extras in there. And so when we need a representative, basically, in my opinion, that can speak to those issues and also that people can identify with in terms of knowing that person really has an idea of the challenges that they're experiencing.
I think it's important, Dr. Clark, what you said about the intersectionality of all these issues. I think that folks will try to position you as being just that candidate.
Right.
And Miss Nikki, you're on the Pastor Nikki, you're on the line again. Thank you for joining us again. But I think that the children are watching, and they are looking at us, and they're seeing if we are hypocrites and saying that you can overcome and you can become and you can serve regardless of your past, regardless of your background. They're looking at us for the example. And I think this is an exemplary opportunity for our children to watch. And I know you mentor and you stand in the gap for many of our children in our region. Talk a little bit about the message of this race to our youth.
Yes, well, actually, this is, and I'm going to use Pastor James. Pastor James' testimony, he is successful reentry. He is what we call successful reentry, someone who have re-entered society, someone who the kids can look up to and say, you know what, I can, even if I've made a mistake right now, that is a person right there who have made a mistake and now they are really doing something absolutely amazing. And as I said before, when Pastor James go into these schools and he go and speak to the students, I'm debating his testimony is, not only his testimony, but how captivating he is to them, because they're looking at him in real time saying, wow, this is a man who went to prison, who, life plus 40, and now he's standing here speaking to me, standing here successful. He's a responsible adult. And because most of our youth, they see it. They have experienced someone in their family who has gone through incarceration. And most of the kids that we serve, especially in Gaston and Leon, they have experienced that with a parent, with a brother, sister, whoever. They have experienced it. So to see success, that speaks volumes to our youth. So the impact is very great. And I love the fact that he has been on the front line of that youth, driving the driving force to us being able to provide adequate programming, effective programming that makes an impact in the lives of our kids. So I really applaud Pastor James for what you have done and how you paved the way even for other people to come, not just for you to do it, but to open doors for other people to come in who have a passion for it, who have been working in that field to be able to carry out the vision. So this is a great thing for the youth as well as all of us and men and women who have been through some things to say, you know what, you can come out.
Amen. Amen.
Well, I tell you, this is just, and I'm sitting here saying, well, our one-on-one had so many phases, and it seemed like when we got on criminal justice reform, we just ended up there. So I think that throughout the next month, we probably do one-on-ones when it comes to mental health, because, I've been able to deal with, a lot of young a lot of our young men who are incarcerated in juvenile detention who have mental health. I mean, I had several situations where I had to go to the school system to find out why haven't you been testing these kids like they should? Why haven't you been making sure that they had proper testing? And we discovered that one kid got tested in the 3rd grade and never got tested again. But yet and still they graduated this kid, and now he's facing murder charges. So the work from criminal justice, it just spirals over into so many channels of our community and of our lives. So even though criminal justice is the banner or the baton that I run with, it also just opens up so many other avenues. When we talk about business minority participation, when we're talking about the inequities in our disparity in our economy. So there's so much that this door opens that has caused my life to have a passion for. So as we get ready to close the show, certainly want to thank God for Pastor Nikki, who I am elated that, we have connected, and I'm elated that I've been able to just say, hey, let's do this in a uniform way. You're doing it, I'm doing it. How can we merge what we're doing and be more effective? And guess what? She'll tell you, I don't have to be at the forefront. As a matter of fact, you tell me, how do I list you as the director? I just want to serve. So she's my boss. Isn't that something?
Yeah. Well, that's how community moves forward, and that's how community work. And I just want to make sure we have a really great notebook moment before we leave out on today's broadcast, and we continue the conversation, because this is an exciting race.
It's exciting.
And there's a lot of people running for the seat, but I think you need to tune into the race, because I believe that this campaign is going to bring out a lot of issues. It's going to deconstruct District 8. It's not going to focus just on one particular aspect of the district or one particular institution. It's going to bring the seat to the people. And I think that that's why you got to tune in. And when we're talking about criminal justice reform, we're talking about those issues that address structural criminal justice systems. Some of that is racial profiling. Some of that is police brutality, over-criminalization, mass incarceration, and recidivism. And all of these things which have disproportionately impacted the families and constituent base in District 8. So when we talk about criminal justice reform, it is a monster of intersectionality of all issues, but you bring hope to the conversation, because you are an example of a successful #successful reentry that has happened in the community, and someone that served when they were incarcerated and continued the service post-incarceration. And your message is that we all can be healed and we all can serve one another. And we know that you'll keep working. We know you probably got work to do when you leave here.
Absolutely.
But we want to thank you so much for your bravery in this climate, in this coliseum of political craziness, of stepping out with your life and wanting to represent the neighbors and residents of District 8.
Well, I mean, and I'll say this, and we're out of time, and certainly I know I'll probably get a grace on this invoice. But however, I want to say this, because you asked the question, the why. And certainly criminal justice reform has been our topic for the day. But as we go throughout the months, and as we fight, kind of like bring our campaign to an end, we're going to be talking about different issues. But you asked the why. I want to close today with those listeners. Why? Why would Greg James step into this race? Well, Greg James had no intention on stepping into this race. As a matter of fact, Greg James was really vying for someone else to step in that I was going to support. But as God would have it, David had no intentions on fighting Goliath until he went to the battlefield and heard how Goliath was taunting his family. And David said, wait a minute, I killed a bear and a lion. And guess what? Is there such a cause? I feel that I'll take his head off. And that's what Goliath said. And that's what David said to Goliath. And David left and went back and told Saul, and Saul dressed him. God, I feel this. Saul dressed him. And David said, you know what, Saul, I really appreciate you dressing me. He said, but guess what? I cannot wear this. Just let me get my slingshot and let me get my smooth stones. Greg James had no idea It wasn't on his thought process. It wasn't on his things to do the list. It's like prison. When I graduated from high school, what you going to be? I'm going to be a lawyer. It was not I'm going to be incarcerated and a drug dealer. That was the devil's plan, and I fell into it. This happens to be God's plan, and I'm getting ready to walk into it. So what happened? It began to trouble my spirit from a barbershop conversation where men gather. And men start saying, man, you help my cousin, you help my brother, you help me. And I said, okay, what is it, God? He said, David didn't go to fight. You didn't go to the barbershop to be a candidate, but it's in your spirit. Just don't let people dress you up. And just don't let them put you on what they want you to have on. Just be you. So the why comes down to feeling the mandate, the call, and then knowing that in a position like this, I don't have to sit behind the table to talk to people who got to advocate. When I win the election, then guess what? I have the voice to advocate at the table, not with an intercessor. Hey, listen, this has been the Greg James Community Show. Christy, we want to thank you so much for Conscious Check. And to all of our listeners, I want you to please stay prayerful, and we celebrate what you're doing. And the race is filled with some great minds, some great candidates who all in their own right have their own mark, a brand that they operating under. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to do what I do. And I believe that I'll keep working for you. And I just want you to shout back, keep working. Until next week, you be blessed.
It's Hallelujah 95.3 FM.